Not as cold later on with a low of 23. Temperatures will rise into the mid-30s. I'm meteorologist Jason Caterina on AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Merry Christmas.
On AM 560.
Ho, ho, ho.
The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So, President Trump has instituted a travel ban. There's about a dozen and a half countries that have a full pause, and another dozen countries, 12 to 15 countries, that have a partial pause. We have announced that we're going to be revetting Afghan asylees after the attack on the two National Guardsmen, the murder of one, the attempted murder of the other before Thanksgiving. It was announced yesterday that per the Brown University attacker and the same guy who murdered that MIT professor, that the diversity lottery via which he became a permanent resident after entering this country on a student visa will be paused. And yet we still have a problem, as was laid out by Tulsi Gabbard at the outset of this week. 18,000 people that DNI has identified, round numbers, who have relationships or past behavior that implicates them as a national security threat. 2,000 of whom, as we heard in congressional testimony from her chief of staff, Joe Kent, are Afghans. And despite that, we have another problem. We have this mentality in the upper reaches of power in big cities around the country, in particular. Not limited to big cities, but particularly big cities. Brian O'Hara is perhaps the worst police chief in America. He's the police chief for the city that used to be known as Minneapolis. This is what he had to say this week about that sanctuary community in service of Pajamas Boy Fry, the mayor there, and Ilhan Omar, and Somali fraudsters and the rest.
We know this has been a very, very difficult time for our communities here in the city. The fear that people are experiencing is real. As our mayor has said, it's been sad to drive down Lake Street and to see so many of our businesses either closed or empty. It's hard to see the impact that this is having on everyone in our community. It's especially personal to me, having been raised a Catholic, to be in a Christian church this morning as we are approaching Christmas. And I cannot help but think of what is happening in our city today and how that echoes with how outsiders have been treated for thousands of years. How Mary and Joseph themselves were considered outsiders and forced to stay in a barn. That's what we're getting ready to commemorate as Christians around the world, while all of this fear is happening right here in our town. So my goal, and our goal as the Minneapolis Police, is to try and do what we can to reduce fear.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you work on, focus on reducing violence, both domestic and imported, in that crackerjack of a city? Right. Mary and Joseph are just like Tren de Aragua gangbangers. They're just like Maryland Man. Same dynamic. It doesn't even merit a response. If you don't see the idiocy of those statements, if you're not offended by them as a Christian and a Catholic, then well, then there's no getting to you. So why waste the breath? For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He's the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He's co-founder of the Muslim Reform Movement and former U.S. Navy lieutenant commander and candidate for Congress in Arizona's 4th. And as I said, because I called him doctor, he's a medical doctor too. Talented guy, Dr. Jasser, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, and
well, you're cutting out on us, Dr. Jasser.
can you hear me? It's great to join you. Thanks for having me. This is
great.
Such an important topic.
Yeah, so, let me just give you the floor in terms of what the Western world has experienced this week in Bondi Beach, Brown University, too. That's still up in the air in terms of motive and more details about the person responsible for those murders in Brown and the MIT professor. In addition to, of course, the plots, the radical Islamist terrorist plots that were foiled in Germany and California. Well, that wasn't radical Islamist, sort of by extension, because there were a bunch of leftist knuckleheads that were also motivated by Free Palestine and all that jazz. But they were, I guess, more environmental oriented, but, birds of a feather when it comes to terrorism. Anyway, go ahead. Do we lose Dr. Jasser? Do we have him?
You got me?
Oh,
Yep.
Okay. We got you now.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, let's break and try and get a better connection with Dr. Jasser, please.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
This message is for anyone looking for $500,000 to $1 million or more of affordable term life insurance, even if you have diabetes, high blood pressure, or taking anxiety meds. Here's an example. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe overweight with type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term life insurance may only cost about $200 a month. We're Term Provider, experts in finding affordable term life insurance for those that may not be in perfect health. If you've had prostate cancer, heart conditions, high cholesterol, or on prescription medications, you may still qualify for $500,000 to $1 million or more of affordable term life insurance. Get a quick quote by calling Term Provider at 800-555-2085. 800-555-2085. If you're looking for term life insurance but have type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, or have other health issues, call Term Provider at 800-555-2085 or visit termprovider.com. Termprovider.com.
AM 560, The Answer.
Okay, let's try again. Dr. Jasser, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, gotcha. Great. So as we left off, your comment on the week that was with the terrorist attack in Bondi Beach and the murders at Brown and MIT and the terrorist plots that were foiled in Germany and California.
Yeah, these are not just lone wolves. These are packs and battalions that are coming from a massive national movement, a global movement against America, against the West, against Israel and the free world. And we're at war. And America has waged wars against Nazism, communism, and we defeated Soviet communism without ever firing a bullet against them. But we had resolve as a nation that we understood the threat. And the only way you can defeat threats is by naming it and identifying it. And like the apologist mayor that is part of the far-left identity politic DEI movement, they do our families no service by trying to say that somehow it's an identity movement. It's ideologies. And enough with the participation trophies to Muslims for participating in democracy. We need to stop the bigotry of low expectations, which is exactly what your audio of him talking about the Somali community was. There's nothing more bigoted than expecting less of certain communities than we do of our own families and of our own communities that we consider to be equal citizens. So if they're going to come to this country like my family did, we embrace freedom and we expect them to follow the same moral codes that are part of our constructs and social contracts of constitutional freedom. So President Trump is right, just like he was in his first term with a ban on immigrants coming from radicalized countries that we can't vet. This term, it's even much worse because Biden opened the borders. We have folks, thousands upon thousands in our country that we never vetted, that are part of radical Islamist movement that divide the world into the world of Islam and the world of war. And that's their ideology. So until we have a national conversation and an offense against that ideology, by the way, Muslims are our greatest assets in that. We understand the threat. Our families are threatened in Iran as dissidents, in Syria, in Egypt, all across the Middle East. But we need to have the courage. And recently, the House has been talking about labeling the Muslim Brotherhood a terror group, and that's what we should have done a decade ago. And finally, the president did it through executive order. And that identification should be everything anybody wants to know about what the threat is, because that's a global, political, theopolitical movement.
And it seems to me, see if you agree. I mean that the crux of the issue here with respect to immigration is that it needs to be individualized. It can't be done en masse. We're going to take X amount of people from X amount of country individually, and without sort of diversity quotas. Well, just like we don't want diversity quotas in anything else, it needs to be done individually based on the merits of that individual and with an eye towards assimilation, like you were just describing, as a core disposition that has to be present. Otherwise, it's no.
Exactly. Listen, America is an idea. We have a much better bulwark against radical Islam even than Europe, because Americanism, which was a country founded in a battle against theocracy, has the most potent inoculant against theocratic movements. But in order to understand which Muslims are the friends of anti-theocracy and which ones are actually theocrats that want to destroy us, as in pre-America type ideology, then we have to vet for that. Now, it's not going to be foolproof, but it's certainly better than surrendering to them and letting them cross our border and have Hamasniks coming across or supporters of Hezbollah, or, as we know, it's not just Islamists anymore. The red-green axis has coalesced. The CCP of China, the oligarchs of Russia, the socialists of the world have worked together with the Islamists to create the Mamdanis of the world, and the encampments of movements across universities where you had kids supporting Hamas and movements that were pro-terror, and yet they didn't even know where Palestine was on a map. So they're radicalizing our country, and we see the Ilhan Omars of the world driving the Senator Schumers of the world because it's radicalized the far left. So I care about my country. One of the reasons I'm running for Congress is if the far left gets radicalized, so does the rest of our country. And we need to come back to what unites us as Americans and begin to have a national conversation about, okay, these are policies we disagree on, but there's some things that are just, we can't compromise on, and that is what defines America and who we let in and who's our enemy and who's our friend.
And it needs to be more than soaring rhetoric, too. It also just needs to be very hard-headed competence. We have, I mentioned this earlier this week, 233,000, there was a report, 233,000 migrants that were not properly vetted by the Biden administration. I'm sure that's a fraction of the size of the actual problem. In addition to this, it's little things that are indicative of big things. And the fraudsters, the same fraudsters who steal hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars of other people's money, like those Somali scammers, they know the vulnerabilities. There was another audit this week in 1,400 from Homeland Security. 1,400 cases, records show that sponsors for migrants, part of Biden's parole programs, 1,400 cases where sponsors had died. There was also applications where the sponsor's name was Elvis Presley, who is also passed away. Some people don't believe it, but he has. So I mean, it's just, it is like comical incompetence. They are ridiculing the system because it is so porous, because it is so incompetent, even if you have sort of black letter rules and regulations as to how these processes are supposed to be administered.
100%. And, as not only as an anti-Islamist, but as a physician, I see that healthcare, they shut down our government for 6 months and for 6 weeks and held America hostage while they wanted to subsidize. It turns out these billions were being used for fake patients and fake programs, et cetera. And this is what America's supposed to believe. We've lost faith in government because the extremes are running our government, or at least holding us hostage. And this is just one case that we found out about. God knows what's under the tip of that iceberg. And we need to vet from within. It's not just those coming in our borders. Do you know that in our security apparatus, be it the FBI or Pentagon, there's no vetting process to know if folks belong to the Islamist axis globally and what they believe theologically? And yet if you raise that question, it's about religious freedom, no. Our founding fathers didn't have a problem confronting theocracy. It wasn't anti-Christian to do so. It was very pro-Christian. So we can do it from a pro-Muslim perspective, but be anti-Islamist. That's why we stop the immigration from those coming across that until we know how to vet them. And then we are plainly clear that not only will we root out corruption and exploitation of the systems, but we make sure that the vetting process begins to hold every community accountable, because otherwise you're going to create more anti-Muslim bigotry by people being concerned that they're just exploiting us and not contributing to America as a nation.
We talk about the need to hold people accountable, and people need to see people being held accountable to have confidence in the system. So, for example, we talked a bit earlier in the show about that Wisconsin judge, Hannah Dugan, who was convicted on a felony count of obstruction of justice for aiding and abetting the escape of an illegal immigrant from her courtroom in Milwaukee. What about with respect to people who may have a permanent status or may even be a naturalized citizen, but did so essentially illicitly, or were unvetted, or turn out to pose a national security threat, one of the 18,000 some that Tulsi Gabbard has said are present in this country? Do you think there needs to be sort of a high-profile, legitimate, substantive, a high-profile example of somebody that is in this country with some sort of legal status, but shouldn't be being having that status taken away, even going so far as to be denaturalized, to show this is the level we're getting down to separate the wheat from the chaff in this country?
It is a privilege to be a citizen of the United States of America. It's not something we just hand out because you have a heartbeat and you decided to cross the border. My parents waited in order to get actual political asylum in the late 60s, and they did it legally. And that was the greatest blessing I ever had, was to be born in the U.S. and not in the open-air prison of Syria. And many folks are waiting legally. So we corrupt the whole system by not having a process by which you hold people accountable. And there's no statute of limitations that I know on those things. So if you lied about it, whether you're a congresswoman in Minnesota who may have lied about her marriage status in order to get in, like Ilhan Omar, who knows? Those things need to be vetted, and it is part of the rule of law. The left is always screaming about rule of law and other cases that they do through their lawfare, be it about Letitia James or others. So listen, they're not adverse to using the law when it suits their political interest. I, as an American citizen, want to know that people coming in have been vetted legally, and there's nothing wrong with and Secretary Rubio said it correctly. People here on visas, for example, don't have a right to the same rights of citizens, of free speech, et cetera. So that's another part of the adjudication, that somehow all of a sudden they're here as a privilege to visit, and they can go around radicalizing our university students by supporting Hamas. No, they can't do that. They're not the same as naturalized citizens and others that have the First Amendment at their protection.
One of the disturbing things this week was that fruit stand owner in Australia who acted heroically to disarm one of the two terrorists, of Syrian extraction, I understand, Muslim. So, I mean, a good example of looking at the individual, not the identitarian traits. He acted heroically and celebrated in many circles. But the disturbing thing was I saw there was a lot of criticism of him from some elements of the Muslim community in Australia for saving the lives of Jewish Australians. And so, this ratcheting up of anti-Semitism that has occurred since the 10/7 terrorist attack in Gaza, this continues to be a real problem.
100%. And we have a coalition called the Clarity Coalition that is a coalition that really is almost like the Manhattan Project against political Islam. It's a coalition like the Committee on the Present Danger that fought against Soviet communism, that brings together Muslims, non-Muslims, former Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus, and others. People can see it at claritycoalition.org. And, Ahmed, the Syrian immigrant in Australia who pulled that weapon away, that metaphor of pulling away, we have to pull away the ideas of radicalism from Muslims, and the silent Muslims are no different than the silent Germans. And if you don't look any further than Qatar. Qatar put out a press release. Remember, Qatar runs Al Jazeera, the largest Muslim radicalization propaganda arm on the planet that 60 million Arabs watch a day. Their press release after Australia didn't mention that the victims were Jewish, didn't mention that it happened on Hanukkah, said it was a crime, and didn't mention terrorism. This is why Muslims are being radicalized. That's the establishment that's guiding our community all the while our largest military base is there. And you had a voice vote in Congress about the Muslim Brotherhood designation just a few days ago that basically stripped it of the global designation. Why? Because of the Qatari lobby in Congress. So if you wonder where the Muslim voice is to counter these ideas, our own members of Congress don't want to be on record on countering the Brotherhood because of the Qatari lobby that ultimately is the central cancer cell of radicalization of our community.
Well, very frustrating. Dr. Jasser, if the citizens of Arizona 4 don't vote you into Congress, then they are out of their minds. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, co-founder of Muslim Reform Movement, former U.S. Navy lieutenant commander, and again, candidate for Congress in Arizona 4. Dr. Jasser, happy holidays. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
God bless. Thanks for having me.
And he joins us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Santa's coming to town. Oh, my God.
On AM 560.
Santa here? I know him.
The Answer. Looking for some hope? Listen to Leading the Way with Dr. Michael Youssef on our sister station, AM 1160. Hope for your life. Weekday mornings starting at 8.